Let's bring in Niles Investment Management founder and portfolio manager Dan Niles. Dan, let's start with Alphabet, actually, because the stock's also up about 4.4%. Don't know if you know any particular reason for that move this morning, but overall, sort of curious to get your take, given it wasn't that long ago that everybody was worried about their monopoly in search, particularly being eroded by the likes of ChatGPT.
Yeah, I look at Google for the long term, and I go, I think they're going to have the best app in terms of AI. Because if you think about it, what makes an AI app smart? It's data. Well, they've got the most free data in the world because of YouTube. And so if you think about what's the most expensive thing to create, it's video. And so if you look at products they have like VO3 or Nano Banana, which is why the stock is up so much today, because they hit #1 on the US free app store on Apple over on Friday, and they passed ChatGPT. That's why the stock's up a lot. You combine that with the fact that it's trading at a market multiple at 25 times. You've got Meta up at 27 times PE, and then you've got the AI names in the 30s, and the stock has a long way to go, especially given that antitrust remedy was way better than any of us ever imagined. They can pay to be the default search engine. They don't have to go ahead and spin off any of their divisions. I mean, they're in great shape when you look out over the next 5 to 10 years, I think.
Yeah, rumors of their demise may have been quite exaggerated. What is it, #1? Nano Banana? That's the one that's #1?
Yeah, it's the #1. It pushed Gemini past ChatGPT.
Right.
So that's really driving this. What I think you're going to hear more talk about in a year or two, though, is their video app, VO3. Now, you can only produce about 8 seconds of videos today, but this is the worst it's ever going to be. And so that's going to give them a massive edge, especially given they've got all that YouTube content to train on for free, whereas other people like OpenAI, they don't have free user-generated content that they can train on. So
yeah, now I don't know if you're an investor in the private markets, but it does take me to OpenAI for a moment. Not one of the names we mentioned, obviously doesn't trade publicly. But do you think at $500 billion, perhaps, that is overvalued, given the competition you see being potentially won, or if not joined very significantly by the likes of Alphabet?
Yeah, I think OpenAI is going to have a lot of problems when you look out 5 years from now for 2 reasons. #1, the guys they're competing with, which is Microsoft, Google, AWS. They've got massive cash flow generating businesses in other areas that they can use to fund all of their AI development. With OpenAI, they don't have any of that. They're planning on burning $115 billion in cash through calendar 29. I don't think they're going to be able to burn that, because I think the private markets are going to start shutting them down as we get out a few years from now. But the biggest issue is the winners are going to be the ones that got massive troves of free data they can train on. So who are those companies? ByteDance has TikTok, so all that data. Meta's got Instagram and Facebook itself. Google's obviously got YouTube. And then on the corporate side, everybody has a Oracle database, right? Over 60% of S&P 500 companies. So they're in great shape. And then Microsoft with Office has got a great stronghold as well. So those are the dominant companies, I think, when you look out 3 to 5 years from now, either because they've got tons of consumer data, so they're going to dominate in consumer AI, or you're a hammerlock with corporations, so you're going to dominate in corporate-focused AI. And I think the companies that aren't in either of those 2 buckets are going to have a huge problem.
Just to follow up on that, a lot of the training, models have been run, inference is obviously one of the key things, not to mention products. ChatGPT has been incredibly successful on the consumer basis. Some would argue they've already won to a certain extent, and then obviously moving in the enterprise. Many would say it's way too early to write them off in terms of all the different things they can move into. By the way, whether it's social and competing with Meta and on from there, Dan.
Well, that's true, but how are you going to fund it? You got to
raise a lot of money. You got to raise a lot of money. Now, their revenue growth is pretty significant. Let's not forget. They're losing a lot of money, but they are, triple-digit revenue growth right now.
Absolutely. But we've seen in the past with technology companies, the guy who's out first isn't necessarily the guy that wins, right? I think we all remember Netscape. We remember Yahoo. You can go back to cell phones, right? Nokia had dominant market share at 40% of the total market. You had Motorola then. You had RIM, BlackBerry, the Crackberry. Remember that? You had MySpace and social media. And so I think I'm a big believer that the market's not going up 20% a year forever, right? I lived through 01, 02. At a certain point, if you look back over the past 3 years, including this year, you'll have had from the big five companies, which is the three hyperscalers plus Meta and Oracle, they will have spent $825 billion in CapEx over the past 3 years. The industry probably about $1.2 trillion. It's not too early to say, hey, am I getting any return on that? And if you look at the poster child for that, which you could argue was Salesforce with this whole agentic AI, the stock was at an all-time record high in 2024. It hit a 52-week low in August because, as that MIT study said, 95% of the companies that have been investing into AI have seen 0% return. It's probably an exaggeration to some degree, but at a certain point, the market's not going to say, much like in 1999 when it said every company that said they had an internet business is going to win. People are going to start saying, all right, who are the names that are going to start to dominate? And it's not going to be 10 names, right? So the question is, where are you in that process? And I think we're getting closer to that as we get into 2026.